Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me one quick favor, see that little black subscribe button on the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, hit that little black subscribe button. Really does help this channel grow, my audience grow, and I appreciate it more than you know. Thank you again. Now, here's the video that you came here for. And I do want to go and wrap with a little bit of a serious topic, but also an update on a topic that we talked about quite a bit last week here on the Aaron Torres Pod. And that is the status of Mel Tucker, the now former head coach of Michigan State. As a quick reminder before we get into the segment, obviously we're going to be talking about serious stuff. And I always try to say this. I always try to be respectful of you guys and girls as an audience, as listeners, understanding that you're sometimes listening with family, friends, children, whatever. Just be cognizant of who you're listening with because, again, some serious topics going forward. With that said, I think everybody kind of knows the backstory on Mel Tucker. Not going to spend a ton of time on it. But essentially, Mel Tucker, head coach, Michigan State, hires a woman named Brenda Tracy to come speak to her team. Brenda Tracy, this is where it gets serious. She is a sexual assault survivor, and she comes to campuses now to speak to students and especially football teams about the severity of sexual assault, sexual harassment, sexual abuse, physical abuse, basically just have a baseline respect for women. And so I bring it up because 2 Saturdays ago, we see a report late at night that Mel Tucker is being accused or being investigated, I really should say, for sexual harassment. We later find out that it involves Brenda Tracy. And then over the next couple of days, we find out that basically it's a he said, she said, unfortunate, serious stuff about a relationship between the two of them. Brenda Tracy basically said that, that he made unwanted advances on her, invited her to hotels, did some stuff while they were on the phone. Mel Tucker said it was a completely 100% consensual relationship between the two. But Michigan State suspended Mel Tucker. And here is where the update is. Mel Tucker on Monday was officially told, guess what? We are going to fire you. We being Michigan State. Michigan State will fire him, and they intend to fire him with cause, meaning that they do not plan to pay any of his money. So that's where things were as of Monday night. But there was an update on Tuesday that is worth discussing here on Wednesday's Aaron Torres Pod, and that is that Mel Tucker has spoken out. He is not going down without a fight. He is not going down without getting his side of the story out. He is going to fight for his money, and he is also going to fight for his reputation. Here is some of what Mel Tucker had to say to ESPN about this entire situation going forward. He said, let's be clear. I don't believe MSU plans to fire me because I admitted to an entirely consensual private relationship with another adult who gave one presentation at Michigan State at my behest over 2 years ago. He continued, Michigan State knew about the information on which it supposedly relies to end my contract since at least March of 2023. Yet only after Ms. Tracy and potentially others leaked the confidential investigation report to the press did Michigan State suddenly decide this same information warrants termination. About 1 week later, with no new information, MSU has moved to terminate me sanctimoniously and illogically, claiming this action has no impact on the ongoing investigation. The investigation is designed to determine if I violated policy. I did not. But regardless, basic fairness requires that process play out before any sanctions are determined. And so this is Mel Tucker. And again, I don't, one thing we can agree, disagree, and he has his side, she has her side. I don't blame him at all for fighting for his money. And I don't blame him at all for fighting for his reputation because clearly in his early 50s, he wants to coach again. With that said, I don't think it will matter all that much. And I don't think he should expect to get very much of his money. So let's explain why. First off, listen, whether it's my opinion or not, I think we can all agree that even if it is a consensual relationship, even if both parties agree, this was really, really, really dumb on Mel Tucker's part, okay? And so outside of the fact that he's fighting for his reputation, he's fighting for his money, which he should, this is just so stupid on Mel Tucker's part. And to be clear, and I always say this, but I want to make sure everyone understands. I am not perfect. I don't claim to be perfect. I am not a perfect husband. I'm not a perfect son. I'm not a perfect brother. I'm not a perfect friend. I am not perfect. But when you are the highest paid employee at a state university You are married by law. Now, Mel Tucker claims that they are separated, I guess would be the right word. It does not matter. You should not be behaving like this. You should not be having what is still by law an extramarital affair. But here's the other thing. You certainly should not be doing it with a woman who was literally hired by the university to come to speak to your team about respect for women, about relationships, about the things that she was hired to do. By the way, that's not just my opinion. That is Michigan State's stance on this. As part of Mel Tucker's letter that he got that he was basically being fired, here is what he said. Here is what Michigan State said. The unprofessional and unethical behavior is particularly egregious given that the vendor at issue was contracted by the university for the sole purpose of educating student athletes on and preventing instances of inappropriate sexual misconduct. That was in the letter sent by the AD, who was friends with Mel Tucker, by the way. That has nothing to do with it. But the AD has always had Mel Tucker's back. And so for him to say that, it means that Mel Tucker screwed up bad. I'm not a perfect husband. I'm not a perfect son. I'm not a perfect brother. But you have to know, if you are the highest paid state employee at the university, if you are the face of the university along with Tom Izzo, you cannot be doing stuff like this, especially if considering who the woman was. And that's even if the story is exactly what you said, 100% consensual, all of that. Here's why. One, there's the moral ethical thing. But two, let's remember, all of these contracts have clauses that are built for stuff like this. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know exactly what every word of Mel Tucker's contract says. But what I do know is these contracts are written where it's basically like, if you do anything to embarrass yourself or the university, we can fire you for cause. And it's very vague. It's not just committing a crime. It's not just whatever. It is stuff like this. The school is trying to protect its investment, and that is why it's so dumb for Mel Tucker. I'm sorry. You want to have a consensual relationship with a woman, that's fine. But one, you shouldn't be doing it outside of your marriage because, again, what kind of example does that set for the 85 guys in your locker room? But two, you can't be doing it with a university vendor because, again, it is going to trigger the clause that gets you fired for cause. And so in that regard, I don't think Mel Tucker's getting his money because this contract is written in such a way that if you do something dumb, it's pretty vague on what we can fire you for without paying you. Is that fair? I don't know. It doesn't change the fact that Mel Tucker should not have done this. So you can release all the statements. You can say whatever you want. But if you simply had not cheated on your wife, consensual or not, whether you're broken up with her or not, and if you certainly hadn't done it with a university vendor, a woman that you just admitted in your statement to ESPN you brought to campus, you would still have a job. You could lose 100-0 every game, 12 games a year for the next 8 years. And they would still owe you every single penny of your contract. But instead, you did something dumb. I'm sorry. This is an all-time bag drop because I don't think he's getting paid and I don't feel sympathy for him. If you want to have, let's be honest, let's just call a space. You want to have a sexual relationship with somebody that's not your wife, that's not my business. But get a divorce so it's on the record. And then, oh, by the way, certainly don't do it with a woman that you brought to campus for this sole reason. That is a vendor that is paid by the university. You can say it's consensual. She was still paid by the university for a service. And I'm not sitting here and saying that if Mel Tucker's version of events is 100% true, that she doesn't bear responsibility either. At the same time, this is on you. This is a sports podcast, and you are about to lose $90 million because you couldn't keep you know what, you know where. Lastly, let me say this, because I think this part's important. I see a lot of people, the point that I just brought up, well, they owed him 80 plus million, 75 million, something like that going forward. And I've seen a lot of people say, well, I mean, it's so obvious that he has been fired so they don't have to pay that contract. I actually disagree. I actually think it's the exact opposite. And I think all we got to do is use a little tiny bit of critical thinking to understand why. Remember, this investigation, even according to Mel Tucker, she reported him in like December, and the investigation got underway in March. There were multiple Freedom of Information requests put into the university by outlets, including ESPN. They were declined by Michigan State. So in other words, Michigan State was doing everything they could to keep this investigation under wraps. And so if anything, don't tell me they're trying to fire you for cost so they don't have to pay you. It's actually the exact opposite. They tried to do everything they could to keep this under wraps for as long as they could. And from my perspective, it sure feels like they were hoping that this was either going to get settled out of court. Mel Tucker was going to, let's be honest, pay this woman off, or it would all go away. And if anything, I keep seeing Mel Tucker complaining about not getting his money. It's actually the exact opposite. Michigan State probably should have made this public in March. And if anything, you're lucky that for the last 6 months, you got that direct deposit every 2 weeks. Just for fun, I went ahead and looked it up. Mel Tucker makes about $9.5 million a year over the totality of his contract. So let's use that as a baseline number. That is $790,000 a month in salary. $790,000 a month. Okay. Over the last 6 months, because this investigation started in March to April, April to May, May to June, June, July, July to August, August to September. That's 6 months. That is almost $5 million in salary that he got since this investigation started. So don't tell me they're trying to screw you out of money. If anything, they just gave you $5 million that they probably shouldn't have given you. So I'm sorry. I don't feel bad for Mel Tucker. I don't think he's going to get his money. And again, to be clear, he has every right to try to get the money. He has every right to fight in court. He has nothing to lose, but I don't think he's getting it because these contracts are written a certain way. There is no, the contracts are so particular about keeping the idea of like what contract detrimental to the university is. It falls under a lot of different categories. Mel Tucker knew this. Mel Tucker knew that this relationship could trigger this cause if it didn't work out. If he doesn't, listen, it's not my money. So to be clear, I don't really care. I just don't think he's getting it because I think he has no one to blame but himself.